Hey, my friend, I'm Dr. Lee Warren, and I'm here with you for a special episode of the podcast. This is not a planned episode, but one in response to something that I think all of us are hurting over. There's massive and devastating flooding in South Texas this week in the United States. And these events have made us all weep as we feel both enraged and heartbroken over the devastation that we're seeing. We've seen the footage. You've probably seen it. You've heard the numbers. There's dozens of people, mostly small children who were at Christian summer camps, that have died or are still missing in this horrible flood. We're hearing stories of parents who dropped their children off for a safe time of learning more about God and who are now traveling back from all over the world, aware that their little one is gone, or likely so. And inevitably, when things like this happen, those of us who have buried children or gone through some other massive trauma or tragedy begin to receive the questions from others who want to know what to do and when they should do it. This morning, our dear friend Christy Osborne reached out to say that they're close to some of the families involved in this tragedy. And we've got personal friends that we're from there. We lived in San Antonio when we met. We have kids that live in the Bernie and Hill Country. Lisa's sister lives down there. We got friends that live in Comfort and Kerrville, like right in the center of this. So we know these people. We've walked past them in the grocery store and shook their hands at church. We know a lot of the folks involved in this. Lisa and I don't personally know any of the families who have lost someone, but these are our people, these South Texas Hill Country people. So Christy said, hey, we know some actual friends of a friend who've lost a child in this. And so what do we do? What do we say? When's it appropriate to share a book or a podcast or to try to encourage somebody? What do we do? And all of us have these questions. When do I try to help? What do I say? How do I try to help? That kind of stuff. That's what we're going to talk about today, my friend. It's a special message for everybody who's hurting over the devastation, not just from flooding in Texas, but from every other kind of trauma and tragedy and massive thing, and who's wondering where God is in all the pain. It's for everyone who wants to know how they can help, what they can do, when they should do it, and what they should say. And it doesn't feel right to me to play our normal intro to the podcast. It's peppy, upbeat music. It doesn't feel right given the weight of what's happening and of the ground that we need to cover today. So instead, I'll just invite you to do three things. Number one, pray for the lost to be found alive and for the families of the ones who are gone and of those still missing. Pray for those people. Number two, share this message if you think it will help somebody. If you think it'll give somebody else clarity of thought on what to do or what to say, or if you think it might encourage somebody, then share it with them. And three, subscribe to the podcast or the YouTube channel, wherever you're watching, if you think it's helpful, because we'll probably be doing some follow-on episodes about grief and loss and child loss and all of that. In fact, we have one of those episodes already planned before we knew about the flooding. And so there's going to be some helpful content for you. If this stuff is relevant to you in your life and your friends, or you know somebody who's been through this or is going through this now, then subscribe to the podcast so you don't miss that, and maybe it'll be helpful to you. Okay, we're going to get after it right now. In August of 2013, we lost our son Mitchell at the age of 19, tragically killed, and we still don't really know why, and I've written a whole bunch of books about that, and we talk about that stuff all the time. But today's conversation isn't about my loss. It's not about Lisa's loss. It's not about our family's loss. But it is my long enrollment in the school of suffering that gives me the bona fides to receive questions like Christy's. It's the reason that I do what I do, and it's the reason that people inevitably reach out to me when something like this happens. It's the reason why I can even begin to think myself qualified to attempt an answer to questions like that. So although I don't equate our loss to any of those of the people in Texas, and by the way, so I don't forget, that's one of the things you should never say is, I know how you feel. Even if you've lost a child, even if you've been through something similar, you don't know how they feel. It's different for everybody. There's a whole different set of problems and survival guilt and things we bring to the table. So that's one of the things you shouldn't say as a bonus to some of the things we're going to cover later. So I just want to say it again, very carefully and tenderly. I don't equate my loss to anybody else's. And so those people in Texas who are on day 2 or 3 of their study in the same academy of bereavement that we've been in, but I can certainly share some of the things that I've learned and that Lisa and our kids have learned about what is and is not helpful in times like these, because these people are now classmates, sadly, with us in this institution. And it's a place like the mythical Hotel California from which you can check out anytime you like, but you can never leave. So there's a whole set of new families in that school of suffering with us this morning. And if you find yourself in the position of loving one of those families or knowing them or being friends, connected to them in some way, or being a church member somehow connected to these folks, then you are going to be a frontline person. But if you're not one of those people and you're just from afar wondering, how do I help? What can I do? Then there's some things that we're going to talk about here that'll be helpful as well. Okay? And sadly, even if you don't know one of the people involved in this tragedy, you're going to go through something in your life too, or you're going to be a first responder to somebody who's a friend of yours or a family member of yours who's going through something emotionally tragic, some kind of massive thing. We call it TMT in our self-brain surgery world. And so this will be helpful to you, and it'll arm you with some things to pray about and to think about, and maybe some things to do for those people, even if you don't know them, but it will also prepare you for what happens when it occurs in your life or in the life of somebody that you actually do know. So the first thing I need to address is something called Theodicy. That doesn't sound important right now, but it is. And I just want to tell you what Theodicy is. What it is it's the thing that's on everybody's mind after something like this happens, when a church camp is flooded and the cabin floats away and 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 8-year-old or 9-year-old or 10-year-old little girls are swept away and they don't survive. That the thing called Theodicy, that is what is on everybody's mind in those moments, and it will be on many people's lips in coming days as they try to articulate sensible responses to the questions that can't be answered. Theodicy is the study of where is God in times of suffering? How can a good God allow such things like this to happen? Those big questions about suffering and pain and God's role in them. That's Theodicy. And I'm putting this here at the start of this conversation, not because I want you to talk about it with your loved ones, not because I want you to mention it or to philosophize about it with them. I'm putting it here because when we interact with others in times of their great sorrow, we are in a very holy place. And the question that hangs over all of our heads in those moments when we're hurting, like the sword of Damocles, is why would God allow something like this to happen? And again, I'm not placing this at this point in our discussion today because I think you should go talking about these ideas now, maybe not ever. I'm not placing it here because I want you to go and deal with the parents and talk about big ideas like where's God when it's suffering. I don't want you to do that. I'm mentioning it because we so often find ourselves in a position where we're speaking for God in times like this. Because in a real sense, he might be absent. He might feel absent to those people. He did to me. I didn't know where God was. I didn't even know if he really was real or not. And so in these moments, when you're up close to somebody, when you have the holy responsibility of being present digitally or physically or connected to people in some way, when they're in that place where they're not sure where God is, then you're in a holy place. Because in a very real sense, he's going to feel absent to them. And it'll be a long time, but someday they will realize that God wasn't absent in those moments. He was there through you, that your presence there was his presence there. And so given that you may very well wind up essentially serving as a proxy for God's hands and feet in times like this, here's a simple rule that I derived from our experience. Here it is. Write this one down. If you're going to speak for God, friend, make sure that you say something he would actually say. Let me say that again because it's important. If you're going to speak for God, make sure you say something he would actually say. And if you know or love someone who is directly involved in this situation or anything else that's devastating, since you will be in the arena with your people when those questions begin to arise on their lips and in their hearts, you need to make a couple of decisions beforehand. Okay? Number one, what do I believe about where God is when I'm hurting or when horrible things happen? You need to have it squared away in your heart, what you believe. I'll tell you why it is so important that you square that away in a minute. And number two, how do I answer my friend when they start to ask these questions, when they start to inquire about these things, when they start to doubt God, when they start to say, I don't believe him, I don't believe a good God could do this, I don't believe that God can be real because he did this. You need to have your personal belief system squared away. I'll tell you why in a minute. Okay? Now, again, this episode, this bonus episode of the podcast is not about solving humanity's biggest question, okay? It's not. It's a practical guide for how you can serve and love others well in their moment of reeling from their massive thing, their TMT. And so I'll just point two things out real quickly. Number one, in this Theodicy question, in this question of where is God when I'm hurting, when the world is devastatingly hard, when the flood happens, when my child is washed away, when my spouse has cancer, when my mom dropped out of an aneurysm, whatever it is, the question is that there's two positions. There's a hopeless position and there's a hope-filled position. So let's talk about the hopeless position first. Your friends are going to be hearing in their heads and from lots of other people, and I believe from the enemy of their soul, they're going to be hearing a voice. And that voice is going to be whispering or accusing or shouting cynically a phrase that's going to sound something like this: God doesn't love you. God's not even real, because a good God wouldn't let my little girl drown, wouldn't let your little girl be swept away while she was away at church camp. They're going to hear that. I promise you they will. Through other people, through the enemy, through their internal voice, through their belief system, they're going to hear in their grief, a good God wouldn't let this happen. They're going to hear stuff like that. And here's what happens to many people in times like this. It leads them down a path of deciding they don't believe in God anymore, or that they don't love him, or that he doesn't love them. And those thought processes are going to be happening exactly at the moment when they need him the most. So at the time when they need to be desperately clinging to him, their brains are going to be telling them that he's not there, or he's not trustworthy, or he's not caring, or that he did this himself. But philosophically speaking, I just want you to think about this. Remember, this part of this podcast is about getting your theodicy, your understanding of suffering and God's role in it, and getting that right and making those decisions before you're in the arena with your friends, okay? So just ponder this for a second. Philosophically speaking, think about it. If there's no God, and we're all just the product of a random and uncaring universe governed by natural laws, and everything is ultimately meaningless, then there is no reasonable, rational basis by which you can feel any sort of moral outrage, since morality itself is just a human construct in that belief system, that morality is not undergirded by anything that's really true, since nothing is true other than our inevitable extinction once the star about which our random planet rotates ultimately burns itself out, right? And yet we do wonder and wail and feel outrage about these things, don't we? And so in the worldview that says there's no God, and therefore outrage and suffering and pain are just constructs that don't really mean anything, we at the same time actually do feel those things. We rage against the dark night. And that leads us to the hopeful position. The hopeless position is it's all random. It doesn't matter. God's not there, or God did this and we need to just walk away from him at the moment when we need him the most. That's the hopeless position. The hopeful position is this: given that we all, without question, if we're honest, weep and mourn and rage against the injustice of little girls being washed away by a flooding river when they were supposed to be safe, when they were supposed to be learning about Jesus, when they were supposed to be singing Kumbaya and camp songs and getting baptized and all that stuff that happens at summer camp. When we rage and mourn against that injustice, it implies that we're not made to suffer such things. It means that something's rotten in the state of Denmark, as Shakespeare might have said. If something's got to be wrong. And what's wrong is that this was never God's plan. Our planet and its people are broken by sin and death, but God is working it out, and our rescue is underway. And we long for it to be better. Not because it's some existential evolutionary thing, because we evolved that way, but because we are eternal beings wrapped in frail and dying bodies on a planet wrecked by disease and disaster, but destined for rebirth and renewal. We have inside us the knowledge and the longing for something better. We're not supposed to be here. Remember the Lord's Prayer. Jesus said, "May your will be done on earth as it is in heaven," to remind us that God's will is not always done on earth. And this is not his will, my friend. We are more than one thing. We are eternal beings wrapped in a frail body. And this calamity and chaos leaves us uniformly voicing that loud lament that T.S. Eliot wrote about, of the disconsolate chimera. I love that phrase that he used, this chimera, this dual being, this temporal and dual life that we're stuck in, this eternal and temporal dual life that we're all stuck in, even as we long for a home that's built on something more solid and which we're promised is coming. This is what you must decide. This is what you need to get squared away before you pick up the phone the very first time to call them, before you send that email, before you send that text, before you go and meet with them at their home when they're grieving, or meet them at the funeral home to hug them in the receiving line. You need to square this away, okay? Because you're going to find yourself in a position to speak for God. And when you do, speak as he would. Because your friend's world is shattered and they feel like they're being floated away as well. And they need you as an anchor of hope and truth. Even if you never say any words other than, I'm so sorry and I'm here for you, I'm telling you, they can feel something solid as opposed to something hollow. And they're going to start knocking on the walls to see what's safe for them to hold on to. And it needs to be you, even if you never say a word. And that often, my friend, turns out to be the very best thing you can do. And here's a verse to help you make this decision for yourself. So if you're on the fence, you're wondering what you believe about this whole situation and where you're going to fall between that hopeless and hopeful position, your theodicy decision about where you stand. Here's a verse. When the earth and all its people quake, it is I who hold its pillars firm. Psalm 75:3. You see, when the earth shakes, when the flood comes, when the hurricane happens, when the disaster strikes, God says, your world is going to crumble, and I'm the only one who can hold it steady. Because in the bottom line, all of us who go through such things figure out, or most of us anyway, figure out that in that hour of greatest need, there's only one thing you can really turn to, and it's the hope that you get to be with your person again, that resurrection hope really is true. And in so doing, you find that the other promises have to be true as well. And so when you're looking around for something solid, because everything else feels hollow, you're going to figure out that God is the one that holds the pillars firm on your shaking world. Your friends are floating away on that river of devastation, and they need you to be there to hold them firm. And all of that I said to say this. All of us want to know, how do I help? When do I try? What do I say? What can I do? And so with that foundation, if you're getting your theodicy squared away first, here are my best answers to these difficult questions, and I pray they're helpful to you as you minister to your people in their darkest hours. Some things that are happening right now that you might not be aware of are happening. Some of these families drop their kids off because that's what parents do when their kids are at camp. They often go on vacation. There's families that we've heard stories about who went to Europe, and they're got that devastating phone call that I can still remember like it was yesterday, even though it's been almost 12 years. When I got that call, some things started happening. Some balls started rolling downhill. And your friends, the people that are going through this, are on planes right now. And they had to go through the whole difficult thing that's hard for all of us all the time, going through security and getting your ID and packing your bags and getting to the airport and finding parking and going through the whole process. And they're getting on those planes while they are carrying the most devastating thing they've ever been through. And so some things you can do is pray that they will have people around them who don't push their buttons, that they will have an avoidance of unnecessary delays, that their planes will get where they're going on time, that there won't be canceled flights and lost baggage and all these things, because I can tell you, I have a very clear memory. The first time Lisa and I had to travel shortly after Mitch died was because our first grandchild, Scarlett, had been born on the day we buried Mitch. I've told you that story before. It's in Hope is the First Dose. And when we had to travel, every little thing that happens every time you travel, felt like it was impossible to deal with. It felt like you couldn't tolerate it. And so that's something to pray for. No delays, no lost bags, no unnecessary burdens, no traffic jams, no problems. Rental cars will be available. All that stuff. Pray for that. Okay? But your friends are dealing with these things that they're carrying that you can't even imagine, and you need to cover them like never before with some traveling mercies. And once you get to where they are, or you communicate with them, or you get on the phone with them, or you FaceTime, or whatever you do, if you're actually friends with these people, and this is a first order connection, or if you go visit, there's always people that are not directly connected to you, but they come, these wonderful people that show up. And so when you do, if you're there, if you're communicating either in real life or digitally in some way, there's a phrase I like to use: presence over platitudes. Presence over platitudes. And for some reason, I think Christians especially, but we're uncomfortable with other people being uncomfortable. And when you're around somebody who's hurting, there's a lot of silence, and we don't like silence. So we try to fill the silence up with words. And Christians have a lot of Bible verses and things that we say when people are hurting that we think are helpful. And from my perspective, I'm just telling you, a lot of them are not helpful. What we call platitudes are these things that we say. And a lot of them, as it turns out, are based on terrible theology. So one of the things I want to remind you is when you get that Theodicy right, also square away your theology. And remember my rule: if you're going to speak for God, say something he would say. And let me just tell you some things he would never say, okay? God would never say that he needed another angel. For some reason, when kids die, Christians like to say, I guess God just needed another angel. Or I guess God just needed him more than you needed him. I guess God needed her to be in heaven more than you needed her here on earth. That's terrible theology. Okay, I'll tell you why. Number one, if you're a Christian who actually has a Bible and has read it before, you'll know that people don't become angels when they die. We're not angels. Angels are a different class of created beings than we are. And angels do not arise from humans. And it's a terrible misplay of completely incorrect theology to suggest that when a little child dies, they get wings and become an angel. That's not true. And it doesn't help. And when you hear somebody say to your face that God needed your son more than you did, you want to punch them in the face. It hurts you. It doesn't help you. So don't fill up silence with bad theology, okay? Don't say something on behalf of God that will make somebody more angry at God. So I'm just telling you, this is a holy role that you have. When you get to be close to somebody who's hurting, it's a incredible honor to be in that moment, because you may turn out to be the hands and feet of a God that feels very distant to them right now. Don't make him feel further away. Don't quote Romans 8:28, that scripture, the famous scripture that, at least in my faith heritage, everybody likes to say when something bad happens. We know that God works together in all things for the good of those who love the Lord. Somebody said to me at my son's visitation service, God's going to make something good out of this. You just wait. All things together for good. All things work together for good. I wanted to choke that guy. Okay? You can't hear it right then. Turns out to be true later. Turns out to be one of the things that gives you great hope later. Not time for it right now. And for heaven's sake, I know I probably don't have to say this to anybody who listens to my show, because y'all are not godless savages, but somebody did this to me and to Lisa after our son died. Do not speculate about someone's salvation, okay? If you're a member of the church that I grew up in, okay, then you believe that somebody is not saved unless they have been water baptized. Okay, I don't believe that anymore, by the way. I do believe you're supposed to be baptized. I don't believe your salvation is tied to it. I'm going to say that out loud, okay? But if you have that type of theology, then it might lead you to ask a parent a question about whether or not that child was baptized, because you're wondering if the kid is saved. And you wouldn't believe it, but people do say things like this. Somebody said to me, well, I'm sure that your son repented of his sins and reached out to Jesus right before he drew his last breath. He was trying to say, in his twisted, cumbersome, bungling way, he was saying, hey, I know Mitch. I know he was a good kid. I know he was saved. And I know that he would have, the last things in his life, his last thought would have been to make sure he was right with God, because in that person's theology, if you have any sort of unconfessed sin before you die, you go to hell. Even if you've been saved, even if you've been baptized, even if you've done everything you're supposed to do, even if you're a follower of Christ, if you didn't say, gosh, I'm so sorry for that lie that I told 2 weeks ago, I forgot to confess that. If you don't get it all on the table, then you don't go to heaven. And this guy said that to me at my son's visitation. And I literally, if Lisa hadn't been holding my hand, I think I would have punched him. Like it was more than I could bear in the moment. So again, I don't think anybody listening to this is going to do that, but it comes out of that place of wanting to say something because you think saying something is better than saying nothing, but that's not the truth. Presence is what matters. You showing up matters. It helps people for you to show up. Just don't open your mouth unless if you're going to speak for God, you say something he would actually say, or you say something like, I'm so sorry. This is so hard, as my friend John Swanson says. Just be there. Presence over platitudes. Let me tell you about my friend Zane Kirkland. Okay, Zane, shout out if you're listening. Zane Kirkland is a nurse, first assistant, tremendous healthcare provider. He's been practicing for years. And when I got to Alabama, he was my nurse, my first-hand man. And when we moved to Auburn from Montgomery, Zane came with us and helped us set up that practice and was in the OR with me essentially every one of the thousands of surgeries I performed in Alabama. He saved a lot of lives with me. Zane was my guy, okay? And when Mitch died, Zane was, I think, probably the first person or maybe the second person that showed up at my house. And he came in. And I'll never forget it. Zane's got red hair, as red as you can imagine. And he's a little bit shorter than me. Neither one of us are very tall guys. Zane walked right in my house. And I answered the door. Lisa was in, I don't remember where she was, in the other room. And he walked in and he put his arms around me. And he didn't say a word for probably 3 minutes. Cried, shook, held on to me tight. Didn't say a word. And I'm telling you, those 2 or 3 minutes that I was held on to by Zane Kirkland meant more to me that day than just about anything else that happened. And when he finally spoke, Lisa came in, he wrapped his arm around her, held her for a long time. And when Zane Kirkland finally said something, what he said was, because he knew Mitch, he watched Mitch grow up, he loved Mitch. What he said was, I loved your son. I love your son. I'm so sorry. And whatever you need, I'm going to be here to do it for you. And Zane went and he sat on a chair in our living room and he stayed there all day long. And that's, I think, the only words I heard him speak. And every time somebody would say something like, oh, we're out of water, we're out of toilet paper, we're out of whatever, Zane just got up, went to his car, and drove to the store, and came back a few minutes later with it. When somebody said, so-and-so is going to be at the airport, Zane said, I'll arrange transportation. Zane sat there all day and took care of stuff when he found a need that needed to be met. And guess what? The next day, he showed up again. And the day after that, he showed up again. And for several days, until after the funeral, Zane showed up and shut up and sat there and solved problems. He wasn't the guy that was saying, you tell me what you need. You let me know. You send me a message. Call me if you need something. I'll be here for you. He was the guy in the chair listening for somebody to need something and keeping his mouth shut and praying. And that was more valuable than just about anything anybody else did. 2 of our other neighbors, Samantha and Karen, who lived across the street in 2 different houses, they didn't even come in the house. Somebody said, hey, there's a big ice chest in your garage full of stuff. They came over. They brought a huge ice chest full of ice. It was full of water bottles. They had paper bags that were full of paper towels, napkins, paper cups, toilet paper, all kinds of stuff like that, plastic forks and spoons and all of that stuff. And for several days, every time that ice chest ran out, it would just miraculously get filled back up. Every time something ran out, they would just show up with another bag full of stuff. They were Mary and Martha. They were serving us without words, without asking what we needed, by just bringing practical help to the battlefield, okay? I'll never forget those things. Other friends showed up and held on us and loved on us. Chrissy Truitt and Lisa Vanderride and all kinds of people show up and stayed forever and did all kinds of things and cooked and cleaned and gave people rides and all that stuff. But I remember those people that didn't come over and say, God must have needed another angel. I remember those people because I still want to sort of go find them and punch them in the nose. And I remember the other folks because of how they showed me that God was there, even when I didn't feel like he was there. So I'm telling you, those are things you can do. Practical, okay? Presence over platitude. John Swanson, again, my friend. Show up and shut up. Tell them it's so hard and you're sorry, and that's enough for you to say. Now, if you don't live there, if you're not actually going to be with these people, do call them, okay? We received hundreds, maybe 1,000 phone calls. Many people I haven't seen or heard from in years, many people I didn't know all that well, many people we didn't know at all. And they would say something like, hey, this is so-and-so. I own the Chevrolet dealership down the road. We've never actually met, but, I serviced your daughter's car one time. Just heard about what happened to your son. We were praying for you. We're so sorry. We love you. That's it. Boom. Quick phone call just to say, I'm sorry. I heard about this. I want you to know there's another person in the column of those people that care and are praying. There were lots of phone calls like that, okay? And they matter. It matters to hear from people. Tell them you love them, that you're so sorry, that you're praying, and get off the phone. Don't say, how are you? Don't say, how are you feeling? Because the answer is, my little girl just drowned. How do you think I'm feeling? You moron. Like, that's the answer that you feel inside you when somebody says, how are you? So that's not the best phrase to say. The better phrase is, I'm so sorry. This is impossibly hard, and I'm praying for you. Those are great things to say, okay? And remember that words can heal or they can wound you. And as you can tell, I didn't plan this, but I had an emotional response to recalling some of the painful wounds that we received at the hands of people who were trying to be nice. I mean, it's not like people just go in there and try to wound you. They just aren't careful. Like if I'm in the operating room and I'm not careful with my knife, I can hurt somebody, right? So don't commit malpractice, emotional malpractice with your words. And for heaven's sakes, if you're going to speak for God, say something he would say, okay? Fill up uncomfortable silence with more silence unless the other person wants to speak, okay? Just touch their shoulder, however your friendship works. Hold their hand, give them a hug, kiss them on the cheek, wrap your arms around them, just shake their hand. Whatever your level of interaction with that person would make natural and comfortable for them, then you let them know you're there in that way. And I would also say early on, especially physically, like don't bring books, don't text them a podcast that you think might be helpful right then. Don't do anything that makes them feel pressure to do something other than grieve. Now, you'll have some friends. There are some people, I'm one of these people, who will say, I might text my friend Max and say, I'm going crazy. My brain's talking to me. It's too loud. I need something to read. What should I read right now? Like I'm that guy that would do that. In fact, Max Lucado and Philip Yancey, two friends of mine, sent me copies of their books that weren't available yet right after Mitch died because they know this about me. Max sent his book, You'll Get Through This, and Philip sent his book. Both of those books were getting ready to come out in early 2014. It was late 2013 when Mitch died. Philip's book, The Question That Never Goes Away, both of them sent me copies because they knew that Lee Warren was the guy who was going to want to read something when he was hurting. Not everybody's like that, okay? But if you have that friend who says, I don't know how to think right now. I need a podcast to listen to. I need to read something. I need to download something. Then that's okay. You've got an invitation to solve the need that your friend actually has. But otherwise, I started receiving lots of stuff from people that I wasn't ready for. Somebody brought over a giant, thick book called from Timothy Keller called Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering, like a day after Mitch died. And that sat on my shelf for years before I finally read it. And then it was helpful to me. But it won't be helpful right away. If you have my book, for example, I've Seen the End of You. or hope is the first dose. It's probably not going to help them very much the day after this event occurs, okay? It might help them a week from now. It might help them a month from now. It might help them 3 months from now. My podcast might be helpful to them a month from now. Depending on your relationship, you decide. But don't put pressure on people to grieve in the way you would grieve or to process in the way you would process. Just be patient and wait. Another thing that a person did that was extremely helpful to us and very practical was there's a guy named Rob Brooks, who's one of my dear friends, who works with me and sells a lot of the things that I use in the operating room. But at the time that Mitch died, I wasn't actually doing any business with Rob. Our hospital had changed a few contracts and whatnot. And it had been a couple of years since I'd really talked to him or bought a single product that he sells in the hospital. I hadn't had really any interaction with Rob in a while before Mitch died. And Rob turns out to be a grill master. He's always smoking some meat or grilling something, making some food. And he started bringing us food. Like a couple days after Mitch died, he started showing up with huge amounts of food that he had made because he knew we had all this family in town and we didn't have to cook. Lisa didn't have to make a meal. Like the people from church brought food and all that stuff, but Rob would bring something hot, a brisket or a turkey or something he'd make so everybody had something to eat. And then for months afterward, once a week or so, the doorbell would ring. It'd be evening time. He'd know we'd just gotten home from work or something. There'd be a little basket on the doorstep with a bottle of wine and some food and some utensils and everything so Lisa didn't have to cook. And we'd see Rob just scurrying off to his car, just wave over his shoulder. He didn't bother us, didn't expect us to talk to him, any of that stuff. He just served us in a practical and meaningful way. Okay, that's another thing you can do. Acts of service that don't require the other person to even muster the energy to talk about it. Okay, those are helpful, and they show you that God is looking out for you. That Psalm 34:18 promise that the Lord is close to the brokenhearted. The best way that He shows up and is close is by sending His people to use their hands and feet to serve you when you're hurting. Okay, so that's the first week or two. Like, what can you do in the first few days? But later, here's some other things that you can do. Okay, later, when the silence happens, when the funeral's over, when the grief, the first couple of waves of grief have passed by, then here's some things that you can do at that point. When the first few waves have gone, the people are gone now, the family's all back home, and the individuals who have lost somebody are alone again. And this is when you can start doing things like sharing helpful things if your relationship supports those gestures. If you're close and you know this book will help your friend, send the book. If you're sure that this podcast will be beneficial to them, send it. If you're friends of a friend and you say, hey, let me know when you think they might be ready for some helpful resources. I've got this book that Dr. Warren wrote, or I've got this book that Max Lucado wrote, or this book that so-and-so wrote. I've got this podcast that I listen to that might be helpful. I've got something I downloaded that might be helpful, a PDF about grief that was helpful. We received all kinds of stuff like that, okay? So when the right time occurs, that's when you start sharing that stuff. And it's based on your particular relationship with them, or if you don't have a direct relationship with them, then it's based on just sort of judgment, some understanding that there's sort of a phase of when people start to have enough bandwidth emotionally and intellectually to consider learning and growing and trying to move forward again. Because right off the bat, they're just trying to stay alive. They're just trying to breathe and not come apart at the seams. So do these helpful things, share these helpful things when it's time in accordance with your relationship or what you know about those folks. That's when it's appropriate, okay? The next one, do start to ask them if they need anything. Like I said, in the first few days, it's just practical. Like you serve them, bring toilet paper and water bottles and all that stuff because there's 1,000 people at the house. All that stuff is helpful. But later on, it's not exactly clear what they need. I remember hearing a story about a woman whose husband had died unexpectedly, and she had a bunch of little kids, and this guy showed up on the morning of the funeral and rang the doorbell, and he had a shoe shine kit with him, and he said, gather up the kids' shoes that they're going to wear to the funeral. I'm going to shine them up. And that's when the mom remembered that the little boy the previous week at church had run through a mud hole, and the dress shoes were all covered in mud, and the little girl had broken a buckle on one of her sandals, and all that stuff kind of flooded into her mind that they were going to need these shoes repaired and cleaned up. in time for the funeral, and she hadn't even thought of it. And this guy showed up and shined their shoes and cleaned them up and fixed the buckle on the little girl's shoe and just did that as an act of service that was practical and necessary and helpful. So you can start thinking about that kind of stuff as time moves on, right? That you drive by their house a few times and the grass is getting a little tall and gosh, I bet Jerry over there doesn't have the bandwidth to even notice that the yard needs to be mowed right now. I'm just going to go knock that out. When you know that they got to go to the bank to sign some papers or something, you see that they're not home, get out there with a few friends and bust out that lawn and clean it up for them, and they don't even have to think about it. They might not even notice that you did it, but those things are helpful, okay? So start to ask or look for practical ways to serve, even if you don't ask, okay? That's very helpful. And the next one, it might seem obvious, you might not even think about it, but as time goes on, it's important that you say the name of the person that they lost, okay? I can't tell you how important this is because you start as a parent, especially if it's a child loss situation. I'm sorry, I must have something in my eyes because I keep having to wipe my eyes. I'm not crying, you're crying, right? It's really important. You start as a parent being afraid that people are going to forget your child, and people dance around it as time goes on, and they say, "Hey, how you doing?" And things like that. But they don't say, "Gosh, I bet you're really missing Mitch. I know it's getting close to his birthday. I know it's been a year since Mitch died. I remember Mitch." Say things to remind them that person is more than just a tombstone and that they're not forgotten. And as time goes on, it's really helpful when you bring up memories that are good and pleasant to help these people start to make that lost to legacy shift that we're always talking about. I love it when people call me once in a while or I bump into somebody. It happened just recently, actually. Somebody said, "Hey, I was thinking the other day, I just had this random memory of Mitch and the way he could tell a joke, and everybody just could make everybody feel better. And he saw humor in all kinds of things. And he remembered a particular story about Mitch that he told me. And it was just a little thing, but it brought him back to life a little bit more from somebody else's eyes." Because another thing that happens to you, you start to think that you might be going crazy a little bit. Because especially with me, like I had this acute awareness that my memories of my son, because I understand the neurobiology of memory, okay? And I understand the chemistry and the neurotransmitters involved in how memories are stored and retrieved. In fact, I talked to Trisha Zodi about this on the podcast the other day. You should go back on the YouTube channel and listen to that episode about her and her husband and what she talked about. But I started having this awareness that my memories of Mitch are going to become less and less accurate over what he was really like over time. And the reason for that is because every time you recall an old memory, you bring it up and you tag it with your current experience. And your brain modifies that memory and then stores it again. And every time you think about something that happened in the past, that past event is modeled in the context of who you are and what you know now and what you're going through now and all kinds of stuff that's not actually true of what was happening then. And so every time you access an old memory, it becomes a little bit less accurate to what was really going on there. Okay? So it's insanely helpful and comforting when other people come alongside you and say, "Gosh, I just remembered something that I hadn't thought about since before he died," because that's a novel memory that they haven't modified a whole bunch of times. They're telling you about it, and you're going to remember that event too, or if it's something you never even knew about, now you have a new piece of data that's consistent with the character and personality of the person you knew and loved, and you can add that to your little treasure box of stuff that you think of when you try to find some happiness regarding the person that you lost. And so say their name. Tell them stories about what you loved about their little girl or their person that they lost. Remind them that you still care and that you're still praying. And this is so important, what I'm about to say. We're almost done here. I'm just trying to give you some thoughts today. Do not expect people to grieve on a timeline that makes sense to you or to progress through stages like you think they should, okay? Stages of grief don't make any sense for anybody but the person going through them. You don't have the right to tell them when they should be done with a certain thing, when they should move on, when they should be through this stage and into that stage. You don't need to do that. It's not your role, okay? Now, if somebody's stuck and they can't get off the couch 2 years later and they're drinking or they're doing unhealthy things, then maybe they need you as a friend to come alongside them and encourage them to get some help, okay? But because they haven't reached acceptance yet and you think they should, that's not an appropriate way to counsel your friend, okay? So just don't expect anybody to grieve like you would or like you did after you went through something that you think might be similar. When it's time, you can do all these things. You can send books, you can send podcasts, you can call to encourage, you can tell them stories, you can remind them you can say the person's name and that you're not going to forget them and that you love them and you're coming alongside them. But remember, you're the hands and feet of Jesus. And when they are trying to find something solid in the world again, they need to grab onto you and you need to be solid. So get your theodicy right. Get it squared away in your mind, what you believe about where God is during all these hard things, and be ready, even if you never say those things, which you probably shouldn't, to be an anchor that they can hold on to. Because as Paul said, we have this hope as an anchor for our soul. They need something solid they can anchor onto. Let it be you, okay? I'm going to put a list of helpful resources in here. There's some books you can use. Max Lucado's You'll Get Through This. Philip Yancey's The Question That Never Goes Away. Timothy Keller's Walking with God Through Pain and Suffering were very helpful to me. Those might be helpful to you or to people that you love if they're going through something hard. And if you think it's helpful, my book, Hope is the First Dose, I think is a pretty practical guide to how you can move forward again after something like this has happened. But it's not for today. It's not for the day after the flood. It's for later, okay? And you'll know when. If you pray, don't forget to lift these people up in prayer. That's the number one thing you can do is put them on your prayer list and pray for them. Quantumly entangle yourself. Intercede for them with the Holy Spirit and let Him be a great physician on your behalf for them to serve them and minister to them. And when you can, put your hands around them and help them practically. I hope this has been helpful. This is just my off-the-cuff kind of thoughts about this devastating situation. We are in deep prayer. I'll try to find some helpful places too. If you don't live anywhere in the Texas area, you don't know anybody, and you want to consider financially supporting this endeavor, I'll try to find some links to some churches or organizations that we know personally are doing that work, and you can trust that if you give money that it'll be used to actually help these people in a real way. So we'll find that right answer. I've reached out to Max Lucado and some other people already. So once I have that information, I'll put it in the show notes. We'll put it up on our website. Listen, this is a devastating event, and life is full of these devastating events, and this one's fresh, and it doesn't make sense, and we're all wondering why, and we're all dealing with this, and it's horrible. But I just want you to have some tools for what you can do to try to be helpful, what you can do, when you can do it, how you can do it, what you should say, and how you should say it. I hope this is useful. Leave a comment. Let me know if it's helpful to you, and I'll be bringing you some more information about grieving and child loss and all that in the coming weeks because I think it's been a while since we talked about it, and it'll probably be helpful. Again, not going to play some peppy outro here today. This is just a conversation between friends dealing with something really devastating and hard. It's brought up some memories for me, and I hope it's helpful to you, and I hope it'll be helpful to anybody that you interact with that's going through this massive thing right now. We love you. We're praying for you. God bless you, my friend. Don't forget, you can't change your life until you change your mind. And the good news is, even on a day when everything is hurting, you can always start today.